Welcome to the Flywheel Economics podcast. Flywheel Economics is a concept that proposes true, sustainable economic growth by viewing economies as ecosystems. I'm your host, Richard O.
And I'm your co-host, Favor Ogbadu. Together, let's explore a more sustainable and powerful way to view innovation, investment, and economic policy making.
Favor, when you think about exports, what goods or industries do you tend to think about?
Well, for me, I would have to say wheat, just because bread is really expensive, and cosmetic products as well, because they are expensive as well.
Yes, often when we think about exports, we think about physical goods, and wheat and cosmetics are nice examples there. Also think about textiles and clothing, which also often get exported. But it's not just physical goods. There's also a huge market for services and service exports, and they tend to fly a little bit under the radar when we talk about trade. And of course, one of the things which has happened quite a lot over the years is that it's not just the big formal sector that's involved in exports of services. It's not just the big consulting firms or the big animation houses that we look, or the more formal animation houses that we looked at in the last podcast episode, but we've also got a host of less formal, smaller freelancers that are a lot more than ever exporting their services through various platforms, particularly online. Favor, you looked into this a little bit, didn't you? You did a bit of research. Can you tell us what you found from your research?
Yes, actually, I did. I did a bit of research, and the first platform is Fiverr, which I know is so popular, having used it myself. For the keyword animation, I could see about 5,493 Nigerian-based freelance creatives on Fiverr alone. And you might be wondering, okay, what can we compare this with? But if you take a look at other African countries, we have Kenya with 195 and Ghana with 112. So you can see there's such a big difference. And I looked at other platforms as well, talking about Upwork. On Upwork, we had about 7,960 Nigerian freelancers. Once again, just trying to compare. We have Ghana with 162, Kenya with 656, and South Africa with 500. These are barely getting to 1,000, and you have over 7,000 Nigerians. And then another platform, this one's basically for designers, called Design Hill. We have 11,575 Nigerian creatives. I was just thinking to myself, I don't even know this platform, but apparently 11,000 plus Nigerians do, and they are there working on it. The only country that I would say surpassed Nigeria, one of the other countries, was definitely Pakistan. Pakistan had large numbers, as large as 10,000 on Upwork and the rest.
Yeah, so we shouldn't be surprised that there are so many coming from countries like Nigeria and Pakistan. These are countries with big populations, got very talented people within them, and also quite difficult business environments. So it's actually quite attractive for someone to, rather than formalize their business and do things that way, like we've seen with some of the more formal animation houses or design companies, but to work from home, provides services through the internet, go under the radar a little bit. It makes absolute sense, particularly when you've got quite a harsh business environment. So we shouldn't be surprised. We've got some people to help us understand the freelance sector in Nigeria. And I think what comes from this would also be quite relevant for other countries with quite tough business environments as well, whether in Africa, Pakistan, or elsewhere. Who have we got to help us understand the dynamics of this sector?
Yeah, today's episode, we have really amazing guests. So we spoke with Awele Emili, who is a creative designer. She's really popular for her comics on Instagram. And then we spoke to Morenike Olusanya, better known as Renike, who is an illustrator and visual artist. Once again, she's super popular on social media and for her book covers as well. And so they were really able to give us some unique insights into the freelance art scene in Nigeria.
Wonderful. Sounds like a packed show today. Let's go and hear what they have to say about the sector.
I mean, the freelance scene in Nigeria I think it's one that is steadily growing. It wasn't, when I started, it wasn't one that I was aware of. It was just like advice from my friends. And it wasn't under that terminology. They did not say, oh, do you know you could be a freelance artist? They were just like, work for yourself. And I was like, okay, let me see if that works. And it was when I got into the scene that I realized that there was such a thing as being a freelancer. So I would say that the freelancing in Nigeria right now is growing very quickly due to like the awareness from other freelance artists. I feel like now people are talking more about it. Back then, nobody was talking. Like I feel like there is people usually look down on people that do not have a typical 9 to 5, and then you do not have a typical 9 to 5, and you're an artist. So I'm guessing people not just being open about the fact that they were freelance artists wasn't just a thing. So right now it's growing more. There are more people talking about it. There are more people putting it on their social media bios that they are freelance artists and all of that. Honestly, from my own experience, like I said, when I started, I wasn't maybe it wasn't a thing, or maybe I just wasn't conscious of the fact that a lot of Nigerians were trying to get into freelancing, because you know how you don't know that something is common till you are in it. But I don't think back then in 2020, it was as common as it is now. It's growing very quickly because young Nigerians are looking for ways to make money, for ways to use their skills to help people around them and people outside the country.
Yeah, okay, so right now, what I think the current trend is now for the Nigerian animation space, people like telling relatable content. So things that you can relate to, like what's happening from any home or any society in Nigeria. How can you tell that to people online that makes it more interesting for them to engage with? So I feel like that's where most animators are right now, trying to create content that's relatable to other Nigerians in society. And that's helped grow like huge communities and huge followings in the Nigerian animation space. Sharing their culture, like creating diversity, because we also want to be on the world platform with other people. So sharing our stories, putting ourselves out there, contributing in diversity, because it's just as much as we'd like to watch other countries and other stories, we'd also like to see our own stories being told out there. And we can use creative, the only way we can do this is to use creativity and creative mediums like animation, design, digital illustration, everything, putting it out there. And I think that's a way we can contribute to the global platform. So I feel the factors that helped with their drive and success was mostly telling their own story. So telling the culture of their country. And also being in a space that you're internationally recognized, and where you can see your work thrive in an international society, that makes you feel more confident in your work and what more you can actually be amongst these people telling amazing stories and having amazing skills. So I feel like that drives people more to be part of that space. And also Africa as a whole, even not just Nigeria, we have so many stories that we haven't told. And it's like an untapped society where the stories are endless. They've told a lot about European culture. They've told a lot about Asian culture, but Nigeria and Africa, there's not so much out there. So being driven to tell your own story in an international space I think would push anyone to be motivated to do that.
All right, so we just had the chance to listen to our guests who had really interesting things to say. And for me, it was just re-emphasizing everything that we had just spoken to earlier, talking about the fact that the freelance sector is informal and it's a fragmented industry in the sense that there are no laid down rules for how everything works out, except for maybe some general principles. So it's kind of a make it up as you go industry, but it works because these are creatives and they say it over and over again. They don't like to be boxed in. So this kind of make your own rules, it works. And just as our other guests mentioned, they do work in the shadows in the sense that nobody's regulating them. Nobody knows exactly the extent to the impact that they could have. So what did you think, Richard?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you make that point around nobody's regulating them. There's no rules. Because I think in one sense, you're right, in the sense that there's not much in terms of government policy or government legislation towards some of these informal sectors. However, there are rules, right? So if you think about some of these platforms, the platforms these themselves have rules, right? If you don't deliver on a piece of work in time, what happens? Well, either there's a problem with your payment, you don't get paid, or someone reviews you and scores you badly on this. And if you've got a bad score, a bad track record, people are less likely to use you again. Whilst you may be right in the sense that there's not much in the way of formal rules coming from government, and there's a lot of flexibility there, I think there's actually quite a lot of in some respects, even more constraining rules that a lot of these freelancers have to work to.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting take, because despite the fact that there's no formal government regulation, there's still structure to what they do. There's still a form of integrity, like, oh, this is the work that we're doing and we're taking it seriously. And that's kind of just the sense, because there's no how that they will have as much impact as they do if they didn't take, or if they are not taking their work seriously. So I'll have to agree with you on that.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit when I take a minicab in the UK, it's usually a formal company that's there. And often people would think that because it's a formal company, there's more protection for you as the client in terms of the quality of service that you're getting. Whereas actually, I think not having that kind of ranking that you might get after, say, an Uber drive is, can mean that there's less accountability for both the passenger and for the driver as well. And I think there's something similar in the freelance space as well. If you're a formal company, you're not using one of these platforms, and you do a bad piece of work for someone, well, you may lose that individual as a client, but there might not be that much of a stain on your record overall. I mean, yes, there'll be bad word of mouth and all the rest of it, but it won't spread as much as, say, it does on some of these platforms where there are huge consequences of not doing good quality work, or not delivering on time, or not having good communication with the client. So, yeah, it can be quite tough from that sense as well. Let's hear a bit about some of the challenges that freelancers face in the sector.
There are a couple of things that come to mind. So one of it would be international conversations. Like if you want to work with someone online, or if you want to work with someone that wants to work with you, there are just like barriers that stops them from, like, there's also this stigma of, well, am I really working with this particular freelancer? Is this person real, or is this person just trying to make me pay money and then not do the work? And and also like receiving payment as well. Some people are like, it's very hard for people to receive funds from people that are non-Nigerians in other parts of the country, other parts of Nigeria, other parts of the world. So like if I want to work with someone in the US, how are they going to pay me? For a Nigerian, you have to start thinking, I have to get like maybe a domiciliary account, or maybe I have to, and then to get a domiciliary account, you have to find someone that owns a domiciliary account to get a dollar account. And then you have to still think of like letters. You have to get letters to get approval. And then some people might not have those resources. They might be really good, but then they might not be able to get those. And then they're like, okay, how else can I do this? Then there's PayPal, for example. We don't have access to PayPal in Nigeria. You can only pay money out. You can't receive money. So that's also a barrier. And people trust PayPal in other countries. So imagine you as a Nigerian telling someone from the US, oh, you can't pay me on PayPal, but you can pay me on so this and that. And then you're like, there's this like sense of like lack of trust. Like, why are you making me go through a different payment platform when I can just use PayPal? And then that would make them want to use someone else from another country. So I think a lot of people face also, as a creative in a country that has unstable light. Imagine you want to create something and the light is unstable. You can't create because you don't know if you're going to have light now. And if you're a digital creator, you need your laptop, you need your Wacom, you need light source. So that is also unstable as well. And that can hinder some creatives. I think right now the economy is kind of unstable. So it's some freelancer, it's very difficult for some freelancers to go full time into freelancing for like if it's animation or digital creation for any design content. But I think right, it has helped people like grow skills that they usually wouldn't like go into. So growing these kind of skills are in Nigeria and outside Nigeria, it's internationally recognized and internationally needed. So like a lot of Nigerians are growing skills that can help in the long term grow like the economic society in digital art and design. So I feel like that would help in the skill growth because when you, and also if they have a passion for that particular skill or any skill, because it can be anything. It's not just digital design. It could be any digital skill they could grow, and that helps people. That helps the society and the community grow as a whole, and also would contribute to the economy eventually. But because of because people, I feel like also because of the economy is very unstable. Like at this current moment, I don't think a lot of people would want to do freelancing. They would rather want to like have a side job or something to go along with freelancing. But right now, I think if the economy was more stable, I would think most people would like to, pursue that path. Also because you don't know what organization would want to work with you. So people don't really like the uncertainty if they're just starting right now. So aside animation, because animation is like a very big umbrella, under that we have UI UX animation. We have data visualization, which also has animation there as well. We have product design. We have a lot of digital skills that people would like to pursue. And it's a very high sought after skill in other countries. But and you notice the people that are in Nigeria are working for people outside the country. They're not even working for people within the country because they're not even demanding those skills, even though it's a highly sought after skills. So in our government, in our society, like a lot of creative outlets are not really geared towards the design space, except maybe it's a studio or like a creative studio creating content for Disney. But like individuals don't even bother. They would just rather just stay in their stable jobs because they're not very sure that this path is like stable enough for me to pursue, and the government isn't encouraging that. But if you come to other countries, you notice that there are a lot of people actually pursuing this, and the competition is really high because you're like, compared to Nigeria, in maybe the UK or in the US, a lot of people are in this space, and there's so many opportunities to like find here. But like in Nigeria, you can't really like now. Let's say I want to be an animator in the Nigerian government. Is that even a role?
There are lots of challenges. So I would say the first one is the currency problem and how the naira is just depreciating, and then how the policies and how CBN just makes it so difficult to earn in foreign exchange. They keep blocking every access, and there are young Nigerians trying to create solutions to these things every day, creating fintech companies, just trying to improve or expand the freelancing in Nigeria, and government keeps pushing it down. And I don't know. I wouldn't say the government hates us. I would say maybe they just prioritize other things, or they don't think, or they don't see the importance of having that global recognition, expanding the freelancing field in Nigeria. So there is the currency problem, how the naira is just losing value, and how it's so difficult to get foreign currency into the country. I have a domiciliary account at USM. That's a USD and a GBP domiciliary account that I use to receive payments from people. And other times they just have to find a way to convert to Naira using platforms like Wise, and then they pay me in like in Naira. Otherwise they just have to send it to my domiciliary account. And then opening a domiciliary account here is like they ask for everything. Including they just want to kill you, right? The process is so long and tedious. So most freelancers don't want to go through that process. But then, like the Nigerian youth, they are constantly providing solutions. So there are fintech companies like Grey Finance that sort of creates virtual systems so that people can receive payments, especially for the freelancing community. They can receive payments, people outside the country easily, with enough proof, of course, like as to where the payment is coming from, and like just enough proof to show that everything is legal. There is electricity, of course. The lack of electricity leads to like a deep decline in production. Imagine trying to create something and then NEPA or PHCN or whatever they're called now takes life. You just lose motivation, and productivity just goes away. The electricity problem is a huge, it's like, because not everybody is able to even afford always turning on a generator and buying fuel and buying diesel. And even those who can afford it are now trying to save costs because everything has gotten so expensive. So there is that as well. And there's also like this, Nigeria has bad PR. So there's this thing where, even on social media, it's sort of tough to create like a trustworthy reputation, because I had experiences where people would reach out because they've seen my work on social media. I was on Upwork for like just a few months and then I just abandoned the profile. Where they see my work on social media and they reach out and they're like, oh, would like for you to design or draw this for me. And the moment I tell them that you're making payments to a Nigerian bank, or the moment I tell them that I'm not based in the US, they ghost me. Social media, like building a reputation on social media and on Upwork, like getting lots of reviews, it's very difficult as a Nigerian because of the bad reputations Nigerians have on the internet. There are lots of problems. So it's like the problems in particular order is the trustworthiness, because there's no trust or lack of trust because of the bad Nigerian PR. The problems with getting foreign exchange into the country and how bad the naira is declining and how quick it's even happening. There is electricity problem, and we don't get a lot of support from the government as well. I feel like if there was more awareness that you don't have to work like a typical 9 to 5 to make some money, or you can work a 9 to 5 and then do something on the side, then I think they just don't like the idea of doing it. There's just something about the Nigerian government and their reluctance to accept modern solutions. And I don't know if it's because there are no young progressive people in office, or I don't know. But yeah, there are many problems.
All right. So, hearing about the challenges, unfortunately, it's not so surprising in terms of the fact that, yes, Nigeria has bad PR, like because of a lot of corruption that has taken place over the years, the catfishing, the scams. So it's like people are still tentative. Definitely, it's not a barrier because our freelance artists have found success, but still, it does affect them a bit. The only respite that freelance artists seem to have is when they have an established enough reputation, and then just to getting foreign currency in the country too. Apart from the stress of opening a domiciliary account, it's also payment platforms too. For instance, PayPal, as far back as I know, PayPal still doesn't allow Nigerians receive payment, and so of course Nigerians have to be creative rather, and look for other platforms. Talking of Pioneer or Gray is something that was set up by a Nigerian, and so issues like that, issues with electricity or bad internet connectivity, these challenges are what these freelancers face, and I feel like if it's not something that can be addressed, has the tendency to stifle their growth.
Well, Favor, it's interesting, some of the reputational issues from Nigeria. I can see that that's a barrier, right? I can see that just makes things a little bit harder, because when you're taking on a new client, trust is so crucial. The good thing, I think, for Nigeria and countries which have sort of accrued these bad reputations over time because of maybe some in Nigeria. Obviously, there's extensive 419 kind of scams that come out from, which have tarnished the reputation of the country. One of the good things about some of these platforms specifically is that they're all designed around the issue of a lack of trust. Because nobody would use the platforms, right? Because if you don't know the person, you haven't met the person before, why should you trust them? So the safeguards that are put in place from these platforms are built to ensure that you don't have to rely on trust of knowing the individual or knowing their work. And so in some respects, it can be quite empowering from those countries where people hesitate to engage people from, it takes away that, because okay, well, there's no reason why this individual is going to be any more fraudulent than any other individual I meet on this website. So if I'm trusting the website and the safeguards they have in place, I can trust this individual, and trade is able to happen, and they're able to have these contracts and able to move forward. So I think I can see it's a challenge, but perhaps it's more of a challenge when people aren't using these platforms and when they're trying to engage people directly, because then, of course, it is all about trust and reputation and having that confidence to engage in a contract with those individuals. On the foreign exchange side, oh, sorry, Favour, you want to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to say that you are right in the terms of the platform, and an effect that has, though, is the fact that it kind of makes it difficult to break into, in the sense that Fiverr or Upwork, they already have like established Nigerian freelancers that have high ratings from customers, and so you as a newbie, both of our artists spoke to that, actually, the fact that they did try to make a name for themselves on these platforms, and when it can be a bit difficult breaking in.
Yeah, I get that. And I think that's probably a common challenge that anyone has when they start on a platform initially. The degree to which people are deliberately looking at the countries where people are coming from, I don't know. I suspect it probably doesn't happen as much as people might think, but it could happen. It could be one of the ways that people are screening, particularly if someone doesn't already have a reputation. But there are a lot of people that are just looking primarily at cost. And so if someone from a country which has an emerging market where things are perhaps labor's a bit cheaper, if they're offering quite a good deal, there will be people who are prepared to do it and say, well, I know the platform has some safety features, some mechanisms to prevent me paying for something and not getting anything at the end of the day, or if I get something and it's not up to scratch, there'll be mechanisms to get some sort of refund. Maybe that gives them the confidence to go forward. Maybe let's talk a bit about the foreign exchange challenges that were mentioned. So how do you actually make, if you're exporting a service to someone outside of Nigeria and they're trying to make payment for that product, how does that actually happen in practice? And I think the reality is it's quite cumbersome and quite clunky. And the reason it's cumbersome and clunky is because the foreign exchange regime in a country like Nigeria is designed to not be easy to convert currency. There is a approach to managing the currency which is very controlled. And so it's not by accident that it's difficult in Nigeria, because the countries have decided, who've taken this approach, have decided they don't want the markets to fully determine where the naira or where the local currency is in relation to the dollar. That they're going to put a number of they're going to have a number of interventions. They're going to put a number of restrictions in place that try and keep it at an artificial level. And why is that a challenge? Well, it makes things like this quite difficult, because you're always trying to find a workaround to the formal system, or the formal system is slow and doesn't allow you or locks you in at an unattractive exchange rate. What we can think of in terms of an analogy when it comes to these foreign exchange controls, I always think of the story of King Canute. Have you heard of King Canute before, Favour?
No, I haven't.
Well, no reason why you should have in particular, because King Canute was a king of England in 1016. Interestingly, he wasn't just the king of England, he was also the king of Denmark and king of Norway as well. But he was known as King Canute the Great. And the legendary story that comes from this king, of course, back then, a lot of people viewed kings as almost having a divine appointment, a divine right. They were there because God had appointed them, and they were all powerful, all knowledgeable, that they were almost completely infallible, right? And so the story goes, or the legend has it, that King Canute, who was a very wise man, was trying to educate his people that he wasn't God. And so he got his people to come down to the shore, to the beach with him one day, and he went towards the tide, and the tide was starting to come in, and he walked into the ocean, and he commanded the tide and said, I command you to go out. And his people all kind of presumed that because he was the king that the tide must follow his command. But of course, what happened was the tide continued to come in and he got wet feet. Or it continued to come in, and his people saw in a very demonstrative way that he couldn't push back the tide. And I think often with some of these restrictive currency approaches and currency regimes, it's a bit like King Canute trying to command the tide to go back. You want a strong naira, right? You want to have a strong currency, so when you buy things from abroad, it's cheaper. It doesn't cost as much. Your naira goes further. But you can't just command that to happen. It's got to be linked to some underlying fundamentals in the economy. And if it's not, it's like King Canute telling the tide to go back. It's not going to go back, and you're going to end up with wet feet. So often what you end up with is, at the margins of this, lots of restrictions and lots of gumming up of the foreign exchange system that just make it difficult to trade. And actually, what these freelancers are doing for Nigeria's currency is they are bringing dollars into the economy, right? They're bringing dollars in, which is helping to strengthen the naira and helping to undo some of the weakening of the currency, which is otherwise happening. But because these restrictions are in place, Nigeria can't really feel the full benefit of it, and it just makes it difficult for trade to happen. So it's a barrier. It's not just a barrier for Nigeria. There are other countries that have these restrictive foreign currency practices. Pakistan is another example where PayPal was also restricted, where there was a degree of foreign exchange controls that were in place. And also freelancers in Pakistan suffered as well. So I don't think this one can easily be solved until Nigeria decides that it wants to take a market-determined approach to its foreign exchange, i.e. let the foreign exchange price go to where it needs to go to. Let it reflect the fundamentals of the economy. And if that means a very weak naira, that means a very weak naira. If that means a very strong naira, it means a very strong naira. But we are not going to be putting lots of policies and restrictions in place to stop that from happening. And I think it's just something that's often hidden as an implication, how it spills over to people who are trying to do business, whether that's official, formal businesses, or whether that's the informal sector and freelancers who are trying to sell their services abroad. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I will have to say kudos to King Canute for doing what he did. And hopefully, economists on this Nigerian side can take a page out of his book.
Yeah, poor King Canute often gets a bad rap because it's often portrayed that he was the king that was so vain and so full of his own power that he tried to tell the sea to go back and it wouldn't, and then everyone laughed at him, which is the wrong take on it. He was actually trying to give a wise lesson learning. So hopefully I've helped correct the record for him. And yeah, hopefully that can be an example which other leaders can follow too.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, what's next now, Favor? What are we going to look at with our interviewees now?
All right. I mentioned earlier about how it could be a challenge to break into these established platforms, but there's a way that freelancers can go about it, and that's having an established reputation. And one of the things that helps them have such a reputation is social media. So we're going to be taking a look at the role of social media in the success of freelancers.
So I would say that a lot of people start, especially in the art scene, starts the freelancing journey through social media. Social media has been very, very helpful to expose people to the world and expose people to their audience, community, and people that create and like minds. So I feel like social media is like the first place to establish like some sort of reputation or trustworthy reputation before now joining platforms like Upwork and all of that, where it's like more vetted and like it's and has more structure basically. Yeah, I think it's through social media, and then they get onboarded on freelancing platforms like Upwork and all of that. I never got onboarded because I tried, but I just felt like the process was a bit tough. If I were born in a generation, or if I was born in a generation that had no social media, I think I would have struggled a lot as an artist. I remember having a conversation with my dad before I went to the university to study visual art, and how he was so terrified and scared that I was going to fail because he had tried being an artist in his youth or during his youth, and it failed hopefully because there was that communication, connection, exposure challenge because of the lack of social media. So I don't think if I was born in a generation where social media did not exist, I don't think I would have grown as much or gained as much recognition as I have gained in my career right now. And I always say it wherever I go that social media has helped a great deal to, put me out there, to connect me to a global audience.
In community, they mostly showcase their work on social media. So that's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. So this has made so many visibility to like a lot of Nigerian creatives, not just in the art space, in videography, in telling stories, even like just making writing stories about something, just writing. So like they post on Twitter, they post on Instagram, they post on TikTok, and it has allowed a lot of people to see their work, including me. Like most of my work, people saw my work from social media, especially Instagram, and they share, as people are sharing your work. If your work is really good, people reach out to you to work with them. So that I think that's where Nigerians share most of their work, mostly on social media platforms. Also creates communities for engagement and builds people come together on this platform.
When we were thinking of which guests to have on the show, Awele and Renike came to mind, and largely because they're on social media. And both yourself and myself, we'd had chance to see some of their work and know that their work is good, that they're credible artists. So I can definitely see the power of social media in bringing work and talent to the world and promoting their work. What do you think, Favor?
Yeah, I feel like for freelancers, especially for artists, social media is so important. It helps to give them a wider audience. I was just thinking about the fact that I remember looking at Awele's comics, very interesting. She portrays the typical African mother, things like that. So if ever I was thinking of somebody, probably my neighbor knows how to draw or is an illustrator, but there's no how I would ever know that because I've never seen his work. But here's somebody that is living miles away and she'll be the first person I'll think of just because of social media. So I feel like, of course, there have been debates over the years or the harms of social media, but in the aspect of freelancing, I feel like it has been more good than any harm.
Yeah, I think we've just got to look at the alternative, right? For that generation that were operating as artists, designers, these kind of areas as freelancers before social media, what prospect did they have to bring awareness to their work? I mean, take, for example, I know a very good cartoonist who was working for some of the newspapers, and he had to basically rely on word of mouth locally in terms of his cartoons that he gave for newspapers. He was sort of eking out a living, and even though he was very talented, there was no way for him to get global attention, really. He was very much known within a very narrow section of the Nigerian press. How I can see how empowering social media has been for, if your work is good and it resonates with people, your work is going to catch and people are going to see it and people are going to be exposed to it and think, maybe I could do a collaboration or a project with this individual. Maybe I should get them to help my business with some promotional material or do a nice comic on this issue. And these collaborations can happen. These deals can happen as well. So I see it as I agree with them. It's a game changer, right? In terms of how freelancers can operate. In fact, it's a meritocracy in terms of how talent is, how it can rise to the surface.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm really happy to see the extent and just the reach that artists can have just because of social media. I feel it is even a given in this day and age. We are living in a global world. So for a lot of people, that's their key. That's their road to success. And to see the impact that social media is having on freelance artists just shows, this is something that we can't look away from, not in this modern age. Rather, we should give more attention to.
So we're definitely seeing a confluence of factors, things coming together, whether it's the fact that social media is there, whether there's the fact that we've got these online platforms like Fiverr or Upwork or some of the other ones, it enables these informal markets to fire up, and it enables freelancers who work in the space to export to the world. But what are we going to look at next, Favor?
Yes, so we're going to taking a look at government supports, if there is any, and what freelance artists feel that the government can do better.
No, I don't think so. I think they have maybe support for they provided some things for traditional design, maybe painting and art galleries, exhibitions. Yeah, but I don't think for people that create digital work, I don't think there's a lot of support or a lot of people out there in the government that actually looks out to Nigerian creative. Even I feel like sometimes they've even created a lot of restrictions on those digital designers because as a freelancer, you're creating digital designs and then you don't have any way to receive funding if you want to work with people in the international space. You have to go through different loops. It's not direct. It's nothing straightforward. You have to go through different pathways to get access to, working with people out there. And there's not it's very hard. It's very discouraging for a lot of people. So yeah, I don't think Nigerian government has created support for digital designers. Maybe because there's no one advocating for this, or maybe they just don't really care about this specific space. But in recent times, a lot of people have been, because I wouldn't say it's the same compared to 10 years ago or 7 years ago. Now, a lot of people are coming out to create stuff in, they're most of the time they're always based outside the country, but there's this recent movie that just came out and it's a Nigerian story that was animated with Disney. So it tells an African story and it's showing Nigerians, and I think it might be telling the government that, there's actually space that exists within the country that they haven't been focusing on. And I think in the coming years, most likely, as that space is growing, they will more likely create support for that. I think first of creating a space that can encourage people to pursue skills that they want. Sometimes the government isn't very encouraging. It's not just in one thing, in general, there's just a lot of things discouraging people from, even first off, the biggest one would be the lights issue. And also for example, I can't say, Nigeria should make stable lights just so that designers can create stable, consistent design. But that's also one of them. And also maybe encouraging people to, maybe organizing events for digital design and animators that comes from the government. We have stuff for music, we have stuff for creating paintings, but we don't have anything. I don't think we have anything for digital design. And maybe just encouraging people, creating awareness, maybe award ceremonies or even the payment platform, releasing there's creating something that can help people collaborate with other people in other countries. That would help as well in the economy. And if a lot of people grow skills that are sought after, it would also help in contributing to the GDP of the economy, I think.
I would say that they should sort out it's difficult to choose. There are many options. So I'm going to say the education sector and then the currency and ease of payment sector. I can't choose one between the both of them. I feel like there's a huge education problem in Nigeria. So even if they were to create and I feel like that's why they do not prioritize. That's why they do not prioritize creating a community or creating training programs to help the freelancing community in Nigeria. It's because the educational sector has a huge problem. Like I said, because it's not something the government really focuses on, just there are fewer opportunities for training. I try to mentor people as much as I can on the platforms like Dear Designer and For Creative Girls, and I try to join to be panelists at seminars and creative programs so that we can talk more about these things. But it's difficult to find a well-structured training program that is created for creatives and freelancers to know more about this. And I feel like if it's something the government paid a lot of attention to, because there's only so much citizens or people in a particular industry or community can do to, sort out or just support themselves, especially when it's on a large scale without the backing of the government. So, yeah, I mean, people are trying to do their own. Like, I'm a huge fan of the Nigerian youth. They're always innovating, always trying to create solutions, always building, and always trying to educate their peers and help each other grow. So apart from them, I don't know of any training structure that happens to teach people about the art freelancing sector, or how to be a freelance artist, or even just the art scene. I've heard of a few communities, but then they are run by the older generation. If at this time of my life where I consider myself a partly successful artist, I still have no contact, so no connections with these people, then it's like, what are we doing in the art or the freelance art community? And I also feel like we have a culture of not sharing as Nigerians. I don't know if I wouldn't say it's a Nigerian thing. I'm not going to blame Nigerians, but we tend to, when we discover new things that sort of will help your brothers and sisters, sometimes, especially when it's money and growth related, we tend to keep it to ourselves because of our, religious and spiritual superstitions and stuff like that. So I think solving problems with educating people would be my first, and then ease of payment, so access to foreign exchange currency or ease of payments would be my second. I think it will help a great deal. I think the government I still think we need the backing of the government. Right now, I feel like a lot of freelancers, we're doing well, but a lot of us are still sort of on our toes or walking on eggshells because we don't know when next the government will say something that will throw us off, and then we'll have to start looking for ways to make things work. Because it's like being a freelancer in Nigeria means that you have to climb different hurdles and always be on your toes and always be ready to jump over hurdles and tackle what the government throws at you. So I feel like the backing of the government will go a long way. I think they need to understand that they will also, like, the economic ecosystem in Nigeria will gain from an even more, booming freelance arts system or community in Nigeria. When it comes to like maybe the foreign exchange, there'll be more foreign exchange entering the country. It will solve the Naira devaluation problem. There'll be like a lot of global recognition and, things like this, and also like putting our culture out there. The reason why a lot of people like Nigerian art is because it's so culturally rich, and because the way we think about art solutions and design solutions, they come with like a nice, unique touch that is influenced by our state of mind and our culture, which I think is a really impressive thing. So I feel like if the government recognizes that there is so much value in this thing, and I feel like art is like one of Nigeria's greatest exports. Like, I'm talking about the visual arts, music, and all of that. So if the government can just like give us more support, or take it seriously, pump a bit more resources into it, we are definitely going to gain more from it as well.
So from the comments of our guests, the trend that I could see was the fact that there's little to no government support when it comes to the freelance art scene. And just like we have said in previous episodes, while we are not calling for a total government takeover, but the fact that there's a need for hand holding between the government and the private sector, or in this case, the government and the freelance art sector, in the sense that, okay, let's hold hands and see how we can take this thriving or emerging sector to the next level. And so while they have made a name for themselves so far, they have done so well, but yet they can go even further. And both artists did call for the support of the government, did give some really good insights or some interventions that they felt were necessary. And I feel like, it's because we live in a society that is being controlled by the government. There's only so far you can go if they are not giving you the right support. What are your insights, Richard?
Yeah, I'm reflecting on the term you used in terms of hand-holding, actually, because I think you're right in the sense of it needs that support, it needs that nurturing, all those things that we try to promote as flywheel economics. But then there's that question of, do you want to hold hands if you don't trust the partner that you're holding hands with, right? If there isn't this trust that the government will provide, whether this is in Nigeria or whichever country it is, if a lot of the time people are operating under the radar deliberately because they don't have that trust in the government, what encourages them? What gives them the confidence that if government does have initiatives, does have schemes, what gives them the confidence to then hold hands with government and then take things forward? So I think that's a really important a point to raise, that this degree of trust between freelancers and government needs to be in place for that kind of collaboration to happen. And I think one of the ways that can be encouraged is through some degree of regular dialogues between government and freelancers. And of course, the big challenge being, freelancers don't really have associations to the same degree that, say, the animation industry was starting to have an association. We've seen the role CC Hub played in terms of representing some of the tech sector in Yaba. There's not that sort of natural counterpoint to have those conversations with government. It's fragmented by its nature. So there has to be sort of those mechanisms for having that communication that can enable potential hand-holding, let's say. What do you think, Favor?
Yeah, I think those are really valid points as well. There has to be a level of trust. And I'll say for me, another part, it would be that the government needs to see value, because right now their focus is there is gain from trade. Of course, there's an importance of specialization, but it's also really good to diversify. So if the government doesn't see the importance of other sectors, it will be hard. I believe it will be hard for them to even want to invest, even if the investment is just dialogue. So I feel like there's also a need for more awareness by the government that, okay, there are other things beyond agriculture, beyond crude oil, beyond the traditional money bringers, I would say, revenue generators. There are other sectors, and we need to at least invest in all of them so there can be some form of growth.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it also speaks to a point that Brenda was able to bring through in the animation episode, where she spoke about how the creative arts are valued within the education system and the degree to perhaps them being seen as secondary to some of the hard sciences. And that's not just true in Nigeria, it's true in a lot of countries around the world, where some of these professions are looked down on, even if they are actually very viable career routes for individuals. But they are seen as secondary by a lot of educational systems, trying to reform and rework the education system so that they're not looked down on, they're not deprioritized, and also having the right trainings, the right vocational support for individuals once they're out of sort of primary, secondary schools or universities, to help them get the certification that can support what they're doing, making sure that training is relevant for what they're doing and useful, and actually helping them to grow and develop as professionals. All those things are an important part of the ecosystem, which government can play a really important role in helping to provide. It does need a conscious acknowledgement from government, though, that these are important parts of the economy, and these are parts that could grow further with the right kind of support. And when we go back to your hand-holding point earlier, these are exactly the kind of ways which the government can really help that ecosystem to take off. Maybe just thinking about the profile side of things as well. What role can government have in boosting the profile of the sector? Now, it can be in a very positive way, in the sense of, how do we show Nigerian artists, Nigerian freelancers in a very positive light? How do we help take them to the world and show off the amazing talent that we have? And I think how Nigerian government agencies engage in, some of these expos and international events, which can help show off the talents of creative individuals, and making sure that they really are bringing out the best talent to be showcased and to be promoted, I think would be one potential way. How else do you think that they could help boost the profile of creatives in Nigeria?
Yeah, I think another way they could help boost the profile, basically just maybe the point I mentioned earlier, just acknowledging that this sector exists and dialoguing with them. Because there's this proverb that says that it's the person that is wearing the shoe that knows where it's pinching them. So they will have to go to these freelance artists and say, okay, how best can we help you? How best do you feel like we can take what you're doing to the next level? There's only so much we can theorize about, but the freelance artists themselves, they would know if it means making co-working spaces so that they can have access to electricity or better internet connectivity. There's so much that can be done, but I feel like it just begins with taking the right steps and taking those right steps now.
I like what you said about co-working spaces. I think CC Hub have shown that it doesn't necessarily have to be the government that provide them, but I definitely see a huge role in using that as a stepping stone for some of these freelancers, and particularly if we think about formalization, because I think in the degree that they're going to hold hands with government, then there does need to be at least a move towards formalization of the sector, and that has its downsides for individuals as well. Like if you haven't been paying taxes, naughty, then you probably should be, and that means that, but when you do start doing that, you can formalize and you can start trying to expect something in return from government, right? If you're a good citizen paying your taxes like you should do, you have every right to expect that government should be providing something in return for you. And there we can start thinking about, well, what are the, what electricity's been provided? How reliable is it? What are the internet connectivity that you can, the infrastructure, is it conducive to that? Are they allowing, companies like the way Main One was able to come into Yaba? Are they allowing these companies to come, to other parts of the country as well and enable this kind of trade to happen? All these things are, come from that holding hands with governments, I guess. But it's that push and having these pathways towards formalization that then enables what's currently a freelance industry and lots of individuals working solo. It then enables them to have pathways to become bigger, to start engaging other people in potential companies that they may have and grow and develop, just like we're seeing with the animation studios in Nigeria as well. So, I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you see there's potential for some of these solo freelancers to start creating businesses and growing over time, Favor?
Yes, I do feel there's potential. There's a lot of things that can be done and achieved. It's just a matter of time and the proper planning and vision. I think we spoke about that in part 1, that there needs to be vision. We can't just taking it one day at a time, as important and good for mental health that is. We also need to find a balance with having a vision. What exactly do we think that we can do with this industry in 10 to 20 years time? So I feel like that will really go a long way in helping the industry to get to the highest heights that it can attain.
Yeah. So taking this from the flywheel economics lens, as we always try and do, Favor, it's saying, okay, there is this organic growth that is happening in the freelancer scene with lots of creative individuals who are providing services to the world. And it's saying this is not something that, as an economic policy person, we should be ignoring. It's something that we should be looking to see how we can support, how we can enhance, and how we can help take off in an even bigger way than it's already operating. And I think when we start doing that, I think it takes us down to those fundamental issues. How is the education system operating? Does the foreign exchange system enable trade to happen in the right way? And what are the pathways? Are there easy pathways which encourages individual to formalize and grow and take on more staff and create jobs and raise incomes in the country. And I think there's potential with the right kind of mindset from economic policymakers in Nigeria, in Pakistan, in Kenya, in whichever country has a sort of significant freelancer industry, to really use this as a what's the word, like a stepping stone towards something which can be even bigger in the future and even more transformational. Favor, are you optimistic, pessimistic? What's your thoughts on freelancing in Nigeria?
I'll say I'm optimistic. I just have to be, because as I said earlier, they're already doing so much, and so I'm rooting for them. As a wannabe one-time freelancer myself, I would definitely say I'm rooting for the freelancers, because in some ways freelancing is the future of economy, in the sense that there's not going to be a doing away of the traditional economy as we know it today. But I see 10, 20 years down the line, if that's not even too much, that freelancing is going to have a major impact of the economy. But it really just matters the steps that we take today. It matters the seed that we are sowing. It matters the support that we are giving. So yeah, that's my answer. I'm super optimistic, and I can't wait to see all my optimism come true.
Excellent. Well, look, this has been a really fascinating part 2 of our series looking at animation and creative freelancers in Nigeria. Really grateful to our guests that we've had, all 4 of them. Favor, over to you for our sort of outro.
Yes, thank you so much once again to our guests. Thank you to Renike, thank you Awele, and thank you Brenda and MB. Thank you to Richard for hosting this podcast. It's been a pleasure being your co-host today. And to our dear listeners, I know it's been another amazing time. And don't forget, we take a deeper dive on stories like this through our website at flyawayeconomics.com. And you can also find us on social media at Flyaway Economics. Till next time, this has been the Flyaway Economics podcast.